These are some of the best moments from a Q&A I recorded a few weeks ago on British culture. What are family relationships like in British culture? I think for this one, it very much depends on the family. But I think if I'm talking in general, people are less connected to their family than they are in other countries. So I know some European countries like Spain and Italy, the family is more of a family unit and they kind of see themselves as a family. Maybe they all live in the same place. Maybe they all live in the same town. That's very common. In the UK, it's not really like that. Grandparents, they just kind of see themselves as like separate generations, but all part of one family. So grandparents will definitely most likely live separately from parents, and the relationship between grandchildren and grandparents are not as kind of connected as they are in other countries like Spain. So I think it's pretty common in Spain for grandchildren and grandparents to have a very close relationship, and the grandparents to have quite a big role in the upbringing of those grandchildren, especially like caretake, like looking after them, picking them up from school, for example. I don't think there's that expectation for grandparents in the UK. I went to my grandparents every Friday after school, and that was the only kind of responsibility that they had. And maybe during the summer holidays, because both my parents had to work, I would go around to their house on a Monday or a Wednesday. I'd stay with them for one day, but I wouldn't stay the night. I'd just stay there the day. So, depending on the relationship, but grandparents and grandchildren, they have like a friendly relationship. In most cases, obviously, they see each other at big events, Christmas, holidays. There's gifts, like grandparents buy gifts for their grandchildren, but it's not really as connected in their daily lives as other countries. And there's not really that much expectation on people as well. There isn't that much expectation on family, to be honest. Like parents are expected to provide for their children up until they're 18, but some parents are quite ruthless with this and they say, as soon as you're 18, no more support. Like you're out of the house, you don't rely on me whatsoever. A lot of parents aren't like that, but you will definitely find some people like that. But it's very normal for people to move out in their, when they're 18, 19, if they go to university, and maybe come back after university for 6 months, a year, until they get a job. But then yeah, they kind of move out permanently. And if you don't go to university, then it's pretty normal to leave your parents' home in your late teens, early 20s as well. And it's not like it is in Spain or Italy, where you might stay with your parents until you're 30 or 40 and then buy a house with your husband or wife or partner. In the UK, it's very normal to leave quite early and rent, and there's not really that much expectation on there's minimal expectation on the parents to provide or financially support them. And then in terms of parents and grandparents, elderly parents don't usually live with their children. Like that's not a thing, because people don't usually have the space in their house, and there's just not that expectation. Usually they might live close so they can go see them once or a few times a week, but it's really not the case where like families start to live together. There's usually quite a big kind of divide or independence depending on the generation. And then care homes are pretty common as well if you can afford it. So, or social care where people come around and care for the elderly people, but there's not too much pressure or expectation on the children or the grandchildren to live with them, even live in the same town as them. There's quite a lot of freedom and independence. But with big events, birthdays, Christmas, things like this, then usually families do get together. But it depends on the family, how big the family is, if they all live in the same place. Some families will do things very differently than other families. So it really depends on how friendly they are and how much they like each other. How do British people typically view and treat family obligations? I think I kind of just answered that. There isn't too much expectation, to be honest. And yeah, you can be as independent as you want to as a parent or as a child. There's not really that much expectation, or you wouldn't be shamed too much, if you don't pay if you don't give money to your 25-year-old son, like, or you don't want them to, like, if you ask your 25-year-old son or daughter to leave the house, or even 21, or pay rent or something like that, this would be completely normal, and there would be no negative judgment on that. Or if someone said, I don't want my parents to move back in with me, like if you're 50 and your parents are 17 and need care, it's completely understandable and normal to say, I don't want, sorry, you to come back and live with me. I will kind of maybe financially pay for some care, or try and help get some care sorted for you, or put you in a care home. Not very common whatsoever.
Before we go on to the next question, I just want to tell you about my free English learning community. If you join for free, you will have access to these Q&A calls. You can join, you can ask questions, and also there are loads of other things that you can get all for free. So have a look in the description or the pinned comment, and you will find a link on how to join our free English learning community. Okay, back to the video.
Is there a difference in how younger and older generations interact in families? Yeah, I think children and parents now have a more relaxed attitude in their relationship, and they are definitely more open and friendly with each other. I think children, I think there are so many people are aware of so many problems that can happen to children, and so many kind of dangerous things like social media and, like, I don't know, drinking alcohol and things like this, that parents now adopt a lot more of an open and vulnerable and compassionate relationship with their children, and it's a lot more friendly. I think beforehand is a lot more traditional. You don't answer back to your parents. You listen to them, very disciplined, especially like fathers. You kind of listen to what your father says, and that's final word. You can't challenge them. But now it's very common for children to, if they think they have a better answer than their parents, then they, they, I don't think children are scared to answer back or kind of provide their opinion on the matter. And they probably are more open with the things that they are doing outside of school and stuff. How close are the relationships between parents and their children? Would they provide financial support in emergencies? We have a social, we have a free healthcare in the UK, so medical emergencies don't cost any money. So that's a good thing. But in terms of financial support, I think there probably still is not an expectation, but I think family is still very important to people. And if you are helping out your siblings or your parents, or your parents helping you out, then I think that is very common. I think some parents that can afford it do try and help their children kind of get onto the property ladder and buy a house. I'm sure there are loads of, or maybe they just wait until they get some inheritance from their grandparents. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's quite common. I wouldn't say, I don't know. It's very divided. My parents haven't given me, they've supported and helped me in many ways, and they provided me with some like money to live while I was doing my master's degree, because I was only working part-time. So they helped me kind of like buy food each week, but they haven't given me like £20,000 and said, go and go and get a mortgage, Sam. But there will be some children like that who have had that gift from their family. But it depends on, how wealthy your family is. But I think still people would help their family out in financial emergencies. Yeah, I think for parents often sacrifice a lot of their life when the children are children. And it'll be very common to have single mothers who work 3 jobs or 2 jobs, or they don't do anything with their, social, or they like skip meals for themselves if they are in a difficult situation financially to provide for their children. There will be so many parents out there who do sacrifice a lot for their children. However, I think that does change as soon as you hit that 18 or 21 mark, where the children, you're responsible for yourself, really. What type of family is the most common in the UK? I think it's a nuclear family. I think people are having people are definitely having less children, but I think most families you could find is a heterosexual straight relationship, a marriage, and also 1 to 3 children. It's quite uncommon to find people who have more than 2 siblings. Over 3 children is not very common whatsoever. And when you hear of families who have like loads of siblings. So, for example, my girlfriend's mom is like one of seven, I think. That's incredibly uncommon, and you don't hear about things like that happening in the UK too often. So, I'd say two is the average, but 1 to 3 is the common amount of children that people have. And yeah, people usually get married, but probably that's going to change a little bit. I'd say people, if I was to guess what happens over the next 50 years, I'd say people have less children just because they can't afford it. And maybe people are more individualistic. We've talked about this before in the past. And then people will see less need for marriage because they think it might be a little bit outdated. It's very expensive, and they might not see the kind of the need for it. So, but yeah, usually a nuclear family.